If you were in the position of an executive and you wanted to negotiate for more, whether that's more money or more like a longer term of health benefits, what advice do you have for the candidate?
Well, my first advice is if you're an executive and you're negotiating a severance agreement that has a significant payout, seek legal advice, talk to an attorney. You had asked me before we were talking, and I said, my goal is, and when I sit down with executives and employees that are departing, I say to them, my goal is to make sure that you walk away net at the end of the day with more than you did before you spoke to me. So I'm not going to take away the precious money that you're getting in a connection with a severance agreement, and your net result is less. And if I can't deliver that for you, and there's nothing in your severance agreement that I think could warrant getting you that additional payout that would net in more money to you, it's not worth it. It's not worth it for me, and it's certainly not worth it for you. And I'm going to tell you that. I don't know that other lawyers will. I hope that they do. But the key is to look at what components they're giving you and look at what you want. If you've been there for a good amount of time, look at what they're paying you in proportionate to the amount of time that you've contributed to them. Now, everybody always thinks that their time is so valuable, I guess you get a year's worth of severance. Well, it's not that easy, and it doesn't always work that way. A good marker is a week for every year. I see that a lot, particularly with bigger companies. Some companies are much more generous than that, but that's a good gauge. Some companies pay out over time. Some companies will pay in a lump sum. If you want a lump sum, that's something you can negotiate, especially if they're paying over time. If they're offering a lump sum and it's, say, December, when we see many of these severance agreements and they're going to pay you in December, you have to look at the tax implications of that. I mean, now you've essentially collected, let's say they give you a year's worth of severance, 2 years worth of salary in 1 year. That's a huge tax implication. So these are the types of things that you need to look at. Health insurance is also a very big trigger. And I ask people, what is the most important thing to you? And for many people, it's the health insurance and not necessarily the payout. So these are the things that you kind of need to make a list of in descending order of what is the most important to you and work through the list.
From the employer's point of view, not the employee, what is the employer considering when they draft a severance agreement?
So an employer is considering the risk. When I work with my employers and I hear that they are laying someone off or they're terminating someone, particularly it's in a situation where that employee just isn't working out anymore, or, I mean, there are clearly times that it's time for an employee to move on. I mean, they've been there a number of years, their position has changed, they're not performing, they're hostile, they're clearly not happy, but they're not taking any onus upon themselves to leave. That happens much more frequently than people realize. And so what I talk to my employers about is, what is it worth to you to sleep at night? I mean, what is it worth to you to wake up and say, I know that this person's not going to sue me, and look at what their salary is. I've said to my employers, I know this is a $40,000 a year earner, but is it worth it to give him $5,000 and have him sign off on a severance agreement? It might be. And then that way you've parted ways. There's no hard feelings. The employee is getting a little bit of money, and the employer can sleep at night saying that they've signed off on their potential to sue me. So those are the types of things I look at. And it's really a comfort gauge, especially with a smaller company, is what is it worth it to you? I mean, if they've been there 8 years, is it worth it to you to pay them 2 months' salary? It might be. So that's kind of really the gauge and the discussion that happens on the employer side. And I think most employers, there's not a set formula for determining how much money an employer gives. And most employers are willing to negotiate that a little bit if it means resolving this situation amicably and everybody parts ways happy.